The prospect of more trade with the United States. As a champion of industry, I'm going to talk to you as, not the chairman of BAE. You've, of course, ran the CBI, been the president of that, been on many boards in the UK. How optimistic are you that we can do something like that with the United States sometime soon?
Well, look, I think it's in both parties' interest to find a way of doing business. I mean, there's no question. And they've certainly got the backing of their president in leaning forward into the negotiation with us. So I remain cautiously optimistic that a deal of some sort can be done. And I think it's important that we look at it on that broad front, recognising that Europe is not going to be the same in the future either.
Well, let's get to that characterisation of cautiously optimistic and whether you would say quite the same thing about the negotiations we're set to have this year between the UK and the EU. Are you cautiously optimistic we can get something done before the end of the year?
Well, I certainly hear the commitment from government to get something done, and I do think they're making that with real enthusiasm. They want to see this behind us. Now, it's going to be challenging. There's a lot of complexity to negotiate in 12 months, but having said that, there's a lot of, I think, serious belief that something can be achieved. It is the question, of course, of what the something is.
The Chancellor, Sajid Javid, speaking to the FT, saying the following in the last couple of days: there would not be alignment after Britain left the bloc. Companies would have to, quote, adjust. That's the message from the Chancellor to the Financial Times. What does that mean for industry if they have to, quote, adjust?
Well, I think it means, first of all, that we can't believe that that is the outcome. These negotiations have not yet started, so it's a view of what may happen. I think, for sure, it's unlikely that we're going to have totally frictionless trade, and therefore there will be an adjustment required. I think it is the degree of adjustment that's important, and I think, to be fair, businesses recognise that. And they are focused, I think, on navigating a way through what will undoubtedly be tricky waters.
The conversations that you and I have had over the years, you have always been upfront and honest. Pro-Remain, but for your business, it hasn't been a huge story for BAE.
Correct.
I just wonder, though, if industry has to, quote, adjust, that we have a different set of standards in the United Kingdom for manufacturing, for industry, for the country, for the economy, how difficult it would make life for the likes of BAE if, for instance, you wanted a joint project with other European countries. What are your thoughts like about that at the moment?
Well, I think you have to have political will on both sides to do joint deals and to work together. So the important thing, I think, will be mindset. I think the second issue is to make sure that the field on which you are playing is balanced, does enable both companies and countries to work together to find a solution. And I think if the mindset's right, you can do that. But there's no doubt it isn't just plain sailing. It will require a lot of endeavour by all.
Well, let's take an example. If you wanted to make a new fighter jet with some other countries in the European Union, with the UK no longer part of the same set of standards, does that affect things? Take me inside the business.
Well, I think as far as standards go in the future, then those standards have got to be set by the governments involved. And at the moment, as I'm sure you know, we are in the process, with the support of the UK government, in developing a next-generation fighter jet, the Tempest fighter jet. And that's being done with other governments, other companies, and we're working to common standards at this time. It is in everybody's interest that for something like an aircraft of that sort, standards are accepted, international, and delivered by all parties.
Roger, isn't this an example, though, that regardless of what the government says the agreement will look like with the EU, that for a company to company, they will be adhering by the same standards just so they can do business with the EU anyway?
Well, I think standards are standards of a business, not necessarily political issues. And that is the thing that businesses work towards wherever you are in the world. We're not simply going to be dealing with the EU. We're going to be dealing with countries all over the world where business standards have to reflect the standards that are necessary for safety and performance.
I'd like to get to a tricky question for the chairman of a defence company at an event where they're talking about stakeholder-capitalism, at a time when there's pressure being put, increasingly so, on index providers to push companies in the coal industry. And I'm wondering whether the defence industry will be next for the index providers to drop out the likes of BAE as well. Where do you fit in to this conversation about stakeholder capitalism at an event like Davos?
Well, I think we should start with what is defence. I mean, the first responsibility of any government is to defend its people. And the first responsibility we have is to work with our government and other governments that are approved by them in providing equipment with the sole purpose of defending those people. That's a positive thing to do. And I think in those circumstances, it's very different from a climate change argument.
Does it push you to reassess some of the places where you sell defence products to?
No, because we work with governments. I mean, we only work with governments in areas and with countries that they find acceptable, that they are approved to work with and are part of our international defence structure. So from that point of view, our judgment call is working with the British government and who they want to work with.